Hi, welcome to History 1377. My name is Ruben Kurian, and today I'm going to talk about two specific colonies that take part in the settlement of the New World, Isabella and Plymouth. When you start reading the two primary sources on these towns, you immediately notice the differences in leadership between them. For example, when the colonists of Plymouth were discontent and talked of mutiny, the governor John Carver went directly to his people and caused them to calm down and see reason. However, when Columbus of Isabella heard of mutiny, he locked away the chief rebel on a boat and sent him to Spain. He then proceeded to lock away the arms and ammunition on the 4 remaining boats, away from the colonists. His horrendous leadership was the downfall of this town. As for the purposes of this expedition, Columbus came to Hispaniola to not only build a city, but to find gold. Even though Columbus found a great place to build a town, his men were tired and demotivated by the time they reached the island. They weren't used to traveling by sea and were fatigued by the voyage. Most of their food was spoiled, and the rest was quickly diminishing. Moreover, they weren't being paid their allowances. Even when his men were dying from hunger and fatigue, he forced them to keep working. It shows that he didn't really have his men's best intentions in mind. Because he didn't take care of his men much, or get them much needed provisions, Isabella was a town that never really prospered. In fact, it barely lasted 3 years. While the settlement of Hispaniola turned out to be a failure, he did achieve one of his goals, however. The neighboring Indians led him to large gold deposits in the area, which he brought over to Spain. On the other hand, Plymouth was an English colony that had many troubles as well, but most of them were from natural circumstances rather than bad leadership. John Carver, in fact, was an exceptional governor. He genuinely cared about his people and their well-being. However, much of it didn't really matter in the end because he couldn't protect them from the external conditions. The winter that year was harsher than what any of them had ever gone through before. Within 2 to 3 months, half of the population couldn't withstand the cold and died. The ship's crew couldn't even leave because they were dying as well. Both of these colonies faced hardships in building houses and making food. After their voyages, both of these colonies were similar in that everyone was too tired to build adequate shelter. This proved deadly in the long run. The colonists of Isabella had caught and spread diseases with each other because of this, and the colonists of Plymouth had mostly died from the cold because the meager shelter that they built wasn't enough to protect them from the winter. But what's surprising is that no one knew how to grow food in the Americas. The Isabella colonists couldn't figure it out, hence they could barely feed themselves. The same went for Plymouth, but fortunately they had an Indian, Squanto, who stayed with them and taught them things like how to plant corn and where to fish, essentially saving the lives of these colonists. As a final note, it's important to emphasize here that the Indians in both these places were benevolent and gracious. They gave goodwill to these colonists, whether in precious metals or food, which in all is completely unlike the image that Europe was painting them as. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching my podcast.